So if I click on my brush button under the load brushes area, and I'm going to pick this concrete stippled, well, I could start painting onto this kind of podium object, but we have another option now in ZeroBrush 1.5. We can create an entire layer from the brush, and the point of that is to create a quick base layer that we can then tidy up. One of the advantages to this is that it uses a cylindrical UV map, and so what that will do is allow us to either make a seamless map either horizontally or vertically. And so it's not perfect, but it's a great starting point, especially for objects like this cube, like say a building or something where you really need all of the edges to line up seamlessly. And of course, the texture has to be seamless to begin with, but this will help you do that if you are using seamless textures. So all we do to create a layer from the brush is we select Options, and right here we choose Layer from Brush. And you'll see when we do that, we get this handy set of tools over here. And when you click the Layer from Brush button, it doesn't immediately create the layer. What it does is give you some tools to adjust how the image will look on your object. So we can change the X scale, which is basically how many times the texture is repeating horizontally on it, or the Y scale, which how much times it's repeating vertically. And then we have an offset also, where we can move where it's starting both horizontally and vertically. And this comes especially in handy if you're using like a building texture or something and you need to get the windows and everything in line with whatever you're doing. The Z values basically don't do anything. Anytime you see a Z value for a material or a texture, that's typically not going to do anything unless you're using some advanced stuff with your material. So pretty much you're just interested in the X and Y values and the position or the offset as it's referred elsewhere in Blender. Also, you see this reapply brush option, and what this lets us do is we can go into any view and say I hit 1 and go to the front view, I can press reapply brush, and this will apply the cylindrical wrapping of this brush layer from whatever angle we're looking at. So we wouldn't have to be in an orthographic view. We could do it from anywhere, like right here, and press reapply brush, and then of course tweak those settings to have even further control. You can also rotate the actual object, and you might want to hold control to constrain it to a precise angle or something. You can scale it, you can do anything you want to it, and once you click this finish brush layer, the object will go back to exactly how it was, because it knows you're just moving this around because you're trying to get this texture adjusted on here. But I'm going to go ahead and rotate this back down, hit my reapply brush button, and then make this just a bit wider, bring this up just a little bit like this, and so I've got this kind of base layer here, and then just press finish brush layer. What the finish brush layer is doing is it's actually baking the image that we tweaked using the cylindrical UV map onto our object's regular UV image so that it can be, and you see it hopped right back there. The purpose of that is so that that layer can be fed back into our main layer system that we can use in cycles and adjust and do whatever we want to, or paint on, and etc. So it's a baking process, so it takes a little while depending on how large the layer size you're baking to was. So we had this set to 2048 by 2048 pixels before we clicked on the layer from brush option. So this baked layer of this, and you see here it's called brush color. That's the name of the layer because we created it from a brush layer. That's how big it was. So now that we have this nice little base layer here, we could make sure that our paint through is off, and then we could decrease our hardness so we have a nice really smooth output of our brush, and then just clean these areas up a bit where the cylindrical map wasn't able to get perfectly. Alright, that's not too bad there. And then of course we could turn up our bump value on this. And if we thought that was too shiny, we could drop our layer size really low and then select options and color new layers. And then what I like to do when making a specular color layer, it can actually be super small because if you're just using a layer for a solid color, then the resolution makes absolutely no difference. So then we can hold I to bring up our color dropper, and I like to select just a random color from the object I'm working on, come over here and click it and make sure it's active there, and then press Add Specular. And you see now we have a much more toned down specular map, so this looks much more like concrete or something like that. And then I could select back on that layer. Now we can stand to increase or decrease this bump a little bit and not have it look so too shiny or whatever. Alright, so over here I'm going to click on my object mode button to get me out of texture paint, and then just click on this cube and we'll make another one. So I'll just click my texture paint button, which you see made a brown layer of a size 64 because that's what we left it on last, so that's no good. So we'll want to click here, change that back to 2048. So long as there's only one layer on here, when we press our Reset UVs button, it will also reset that layer because it's for exactly for situations like this where you did something by accident or whatever. So we can just press this and it'll reset it, but we also want to turn off color new layers. We want this layer to be the default transparent layer that ZeroBrush uses while in Blender render mode. And so we'll just hit our reset button there. And so we've got our default layer back. We can come over here to brush and let's pick one of these nice boards textures. So immediately if I press options and layer from brush, we'll get this generic layer on here. And you can see now that we've got an image that actually has some angles to it, how bad this default looks. So we can press 1 to go into front view, press reapply brush, and we can adjust the, of course, the horizontal scale here and the vertical scale. Anyway, we could spend a long time on this and figure out how we wanted this to look, but the point is, when you're using cube objects, this cylindrical UV map that's temporarily generated while we're setting up our brush layer does a really fine job of making our seamless texture work seamlessly against all these angles, which is really nice. And then of course once we're ready, we'll click Finish Brush Layer, and that will bake this on into a regular ZeroBrush paint layer, which we can use in Blender Render and Cycles. Alright, that's cool. Okay, so you can see how not great the top of this looks because the cylindrical map that the layer from brush generates can only go around horizontally, or we could have come up on the top and hit 5 to go into top view, and we could have pressed our reapply brush button and done it that way. Or indeed, we can actually create 2 of these layers and then just erase over the areas of one of them so that they'll show up how we want. But in this situation, I'm just going to click this little button here, which allows us to, if we hold Alt and then click, allows us to select faces. And then once we do that, our paint will only go onto that selected face. So that's helpful. So I'll press 5 to go to top view, and I'll just lay down a simple rest of this wood so it doesn't look so entirely bad. Increase my hardness so that this goes on really quickly. And there you go. So that's pretty cool.